papers right there in the courtroom while my parents smiled across the aisle like they'd finally won something long overdue. The pen scratched louder than it should have against the thick legal paper, each stroke echoing in the high-ceilinged room like a slow heartbeat counting down. My lawyer's fingers twitched near my sleeve. He looked like he wanted to yank my hand back before the ink could dry. His face a mask of professional restraint mixed with something almost personal, almost pained. Across the aisle, Mom sat ramrod straight in her navy blazer, the one she'd worn to every family wedding and funeral. Her lips curved just enough to show satisfaction without breaking into full triumph. Dad stared at the judge's bench, jaw set tight. The same stubborn line he used to get when staring down overdue bills or a stubborn tractor engine that refused to turn over. The judge, an older man with wire-rimmed glasses and a voice worn smooth by decades of quiet authority, leaned forward one last time. "Miss Thompson," he said gently but firmly, "you understand this transfer is permanent? Once signed, the property reverts fully to your parents. No conditions, no appeals on this point." I met his eyes, gray, steady, kind in a way that made the moment feel even heavier. "Yes," I said, voice steady even though my throat felt lined with sandpaper. "I understand." The gavel came down with a polite tap, more formality than drama. Everyone began to gather their folders and briefcases. That was the moment everyone thought the story ended. They didn't know it was only beginning. The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were still sacred in their own small way. I drove the long route home past the old mill just to catch the scent of river water mixed with pine sap, windows down, radio off, letting the quiet wash over me like it used to when I was a teenager escaping family tension. The envelope sat on the passenger seat the entire drive, plain white with the county seal in the corner, heavy as a brick even though it was only a few sheets. I carried it inside without looking at it again until I was at the kitchen counter, kettle already whistling behind me like an impatient reminder that life kept moving. I sliced the envelope open with a butter knife, unfolded the pages, and let the legal language hit me in slow motion. Polite poison, that's what it always felt like, phrases like undue influence, lack of capacity, coercion, wrapped in formal courtesy that stung deeper because of how carefully they were chosen. I read it twice before the words stopped swimming on the page. They were suing me. They wanted the farm back, the 23 acres of rolling pasture, the red barn my great-grandfather had nailed together board by board with lumber salvaged from an abandoned grain elevator after the war, the pond where I caught my first bass at 7 years old using a cane pole and night crawlers Dad dug up himself. They claimed the deed transfer had been under duress, that I'd pressured them when they were vulnerable. I stood there in the dim kitchen light, listening to the fridge hum and cycle until the sound blurred into my own heartbeat slowing. Each thump a reminder that some fractures don't announce themselves. They just appear one ordinary Tuesday. That farm wasn't just land. It was memory made solid. It was the gravel lane where I learned to ride a bike without training wheels, wobbling down the slope until I crashed into the lilac bush at the bottom. Thorns scratching my arms but laughter bubbling up anyway because Dad was there to pick me up and dust me off without a word of scolding. It was the summer kitchen where Mom taught me to can peaches, the steam rising in clouds that smelled like sunshine and sugar, the jars singing high notes when you tapped them with a spoon once they cooled on the counter. It was the 3 summers Dad spent rebuilding the windmill after a lightning strike took the old one down. He worked dawn to dusk, shirt soaked through, cursing under his breath but never quitting because a man finishes what he starts. Words he drilled into both of us like scripture. When their knees started giving out, Mom's arthritis turning every stare into a negotiation, Dad's balance faltering on uneven ground, I came home more often. First weekends, then weeks at a time. I paid the property taxes when the envelopes turned red and final notices arrived. I hired the roofer when leaks started staining the upstairs ceilings after every big storm. I called the well guy when the water turned rusty, negotiated with the electric co-op when bills lagged. One rainy October evening, Dad handed me the transfer papers himself across the same kitchen table where we'd eaten thousands of meals. His hand shook slightly, Not from fear, but from the effort of holding the pen steady. "Put it in your name, kid," he said, voice rough but certain. "We trust you. No one can touch it that way if it's yours." I argued for an hour, told them we could set up a trust, a life estate, anything to keep it joint. They insisted, eyes tired but resolute. So I signed. Now they wanted it back, claiming the very trust they begged for was manipulation. I called the number on the letter the next morning, fingers numb on the keypad. That's how I met Daniel, my lawyer. His office was on the second floor of an old brick building downtown. Smelled like cedar candles someone burned to cover the faint must of old files and fresh printer ink. He was maybe 35, sleeves rolled to the elbows, eyes sharp behind thin wire glasses that made him look younger than he probably was. He didn't waste time on small talk. He spread every document across his desk like a card table at a family reunion. Deed, notarized affidavits, tax receipts, the original transfer packet, and read in total silence for 20 minutes straight. I watched his brow furrow, then smooth, then furrow again. Finally he looked up. "This is thin," he said, tapping the stack. Everything was done properly. Notarizations, 2 independent witnesses, your parents' signatures witnessed by their own doctor confirming capacity that day. Clear intent statements. They've got nothing solid legally. He studied my face a beat longer, searching. But they're your parents. These cases never stay clean. Emotions turn facts into weapons. The first hearing was just procedure, scheduling future dates, exchanging motions, no real testimony yet. Mom and Dad sat 3 rows back in the gallery pews, dressed like they were going to church. They never once looked my direction. Not a glance. That hurt worse than the lawsuit itself. It felt like I'd already been erased from the family album, like my name had been quietly whited out from every photo, every memory they chose to keep. Nights got long after that. I'd lie in the dark of my small apartment bedroom, ceiling fan clicking overhead, replaying every holiday dinner, every phone call, every quiet favor, hunting for the exact second the fault line appeared beneath us. I remembered Mom hugging me tight the day we filed the deed at the county recorder's office, her cheek against mine smelling of rose hand lotion. "You're saving us," she whispered into my hair. "We couldn't do this without you." Trust can feel like love until pride decides otherwise, until the moment someone starts believing they were always the one carrying everything, that the help was never help, just control in disguise. Daniel started calling after hours, pacing audible through the phone. "You have to push back hard," he said one night at 10:37 p.m. "If you cave now, you're not just losing 23 acres, you're letting their version of events become the official record forever. The court of public opinion in this town will remember you as the daughter who stole the farm, then gave it back out of guilt." I understood the logic perfectly, but winning scared me more than losing ever could. What kind of daughter wins against her aging parents in open court? What kind of daughter stands in front of a judge and systematically dismantles the story they've told themselves to feel whole again? The victory would taste like ash. Depositions felt like surgery without anesthesia. We sat in a windowless conference room that smelled of stale coffee grounds and cheap carpet cleaner. The court reporter's keys clicked rhythmically like a metronome counting out pain. Every childhood story got reframed in real time. The summers the first came home to mow when Dad couldn't push the tractor anymore became controlling behavior. The nights I drove 40 miles in snow to fix a frozen pipe became overreach. When Dad, looking straight at the recorder but speaking to me, called me overbearing in that flat, rehearsed tone his lawyer had probably practiced with him, something inside my chest finally snapped. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet and final, like a branch giving way under too much snow. After that I stopped arguing, even in my own head. I stopped rehearsing defenses while brushing my teeth or driving. Instead, I went back to the files, every single one. I spread them across my living room floor on a Sunday afternoon, coffee cold beside me, and read like my life depended on it. Every receipt for gravel delivered in 2018. Every tax stub paid online at 2 a.m. Every single attachment great-grandpa had quietly recorded when he deeded the land to his children after returning from the Pacific Theater in 1946. Conservation restrictions that prohibited subdividing below 10 acres. Mandatory annual soil and water quality reports filed with the state AG department. Historic preservation covenants that ran with the title forever, requiring yearly structural inspections of the barn and windmill. Maintenance escrow requirements tied to county code for erosion control along the creek. Pages and pages of dry, bureaucratic language no one had ever bothered to read aloud at family dinners, but they followed the property like shadows, no matter whose name was on the deed. Obligations, not options. Burdens that came with beauty. The night before the final hearing, Daniel sat across from me in his office after everyone else had gone home. Tie loosened, sleeves still rolled, eyes tired behind those glasses. Papers everywhere. "I'm begging you," he said, voice low. "Let me finish this. We win clean. The judge will see the documents, see the pattern of care, see their claims don't hold water. You walk out with the farm still yours." I shook my head slowly, staring at the coffee stain on the carpet. "Let them have it all." He stared at me like I'd spoken in another language. "You're serious?" "I've never been more serious," I said. "Let them have it." The courtroom the next morning smelled of lemon oil polish and warm wood from the radiators kicking on against the early spring chill. No gallery drama, no reporters, just worn oak benches smoothed by decades of quiet family wars and soft footsteps on worn carpet. Their lawyer spoke smoothly, certain, laying out the narrative of vulnerable elders tricked by a controlling child. Daniel spoke carefully, almost apologetic, reading from notes he prepared but clearly didn't want to use. When the final transfer papers landed in front of me, my hand didn't shake. I signed. Page after page after page. Across the aisle, Mom reached for Dad's hand under the table. They smiled, the small, relieved smile of people who believe they've finally reclaimed what was stolen from them, what was rightfully theirs all along. The judge's gavel fell with a polite tap that echoed briefly. Everyone started to stand, zippers sliding on briefcases, chairs scraping back. Then their lawyer reached for the full packet again, almost casually at first. He flipped pages slowly, then faster. His shoulders stiffened like someone had run ice down his spine. He leaned closer, eyes darting line to line. The judge noticed from the bench. "Counsel? Something wrong." The lawyer swallowed once, Adam's apple bobbing visibly. "Just reviewing, Your Honor." But the color had drained from his face completely, leaving him pale as the legal paper in his hands. Daniel glanced at him, then at me. I stayed perfectly still, hands folded in my lap, because I already knew what he'd found. The attachments, the covenants, the reports, the fees, the endless quiet responsibilities that no one escapes as we packed folders in the hallway outside. Daniel leaned close and whispered so only I could hear. "What did you do?" "Nothing," I said softly, almost smiling for the first time in months. "I just stopped carrying it for them." That evening the phone rang while I was washing dishes, suds up to my elbows. Dad's voice, tight-clipped the way it got when he was trying not to show panic. "We need to talk. About the farm." "I thought that was settled," I said, turning off the faucet. "So did we." A long pause stretched across the line. "Our lawyer says there are ongoing requirements. Reports due next month. Fees we didn't know about." I corrected gently, drying my hands on a dish towel. "Obligations." Silence stretched like taut wire. Then Mom came on next, quieter, almost small. "We didn't realize how much you were handling. The soil reports. The conservation fees. The barn inspections every spring. All of it." "I never hid it," I told her. "I just didn't shout it every time I paid a bill or filed a form at midnight." A week later we met at the farmhouse. No lawyers, no mediators, just the three of us. The kitchen still smelled like cinnamon from the apple pie Mom had baked that morning and old pine from the beams overhead. She spread bills and compliance letters across the table like a losing poker hand she couldn't bluff her way out of. I didn't know it stacked up like this, she whispered, voice cracking on the last word. The annual fees alone. It always did, I said quietly, sitting across from her. She looked up, eyes wet but steady for the first time in years. Why didn't you ever complain? Why didn't you tell us how heavy it was? I did, I answered, folding my hands, just not loud enough to hurt your pride. I thought if I carried it quietly you'd feel safe. That was my mistake. We talked for hours, not about fault or blame, but about what ownership actually costs when no one's watching. The hidden hours, the worry that never sleeps, the way land doesn't care who loves it. It just demands care. As I walked to the car in the dusk, Dad stood on the porch steps, hands in his pockets. You didn't have to let us walk into this blind, he said, voice rough. I know, I replied, pausing at the bottom step. But I chose to. He held my gaze a long second, longer than he had in years. That was enough. The truth didn't arrive in fireworks or tearful apologies on doorsteps. It arrived in quiet phone calls at odd hours, long pauses filled with breathing instead of accusations, PDFs forwarded at 2 a.m. with subject lines like "Question about Form 47", and the slow, reluctant understanding that control without responsibility is just a heavier word for burden. They struggled at first, missed a deadline, paid a late fee, argued with the county inspector over erosion fencing. They hired a consultant from the extension office, set calendar reminders on their phones, learned the difference between owning land and letting land own you. One Sunday afternoon, Mom called just to ask which form needed to be notarized by March 15th for the water report.
I ensuarat calmly, no jugment.
I never took the reins back. That mattered more than any grand gesture. Months passed quieter than anything before the lawsuit. No more court dates circled on calendars. No more accusations whispered in family group chats. They didn't suddenly turn overflowing with gratitude in some movie script way. No tearful porch scene where everything is forgiven in 30 seconds. But they started seeing me again. Not as the villain who stole their security. Not as the fixer who made them feel small, just as their daughter. We ate lunch at the diner on Route 9 sometimes. Greasy spoons, bottomless coffee, small talk about weather and crops. Eventually we moved back to the kitchen table at the farm. The same one scarred from decades of holiday dinners. One afternoon, Mom slid a neat 3-ring binder toward me across the oilcloth. I kept everything organized this time, she said, almost shy. Tabs, labels, dates highlighted. I smiled. I can see that. She hesitated, fingers tracing the edge of the binder. I didn't understand how much weight you carried alone. All those nights you didn't sleep because a storm was coming. I know, I said gently, covering her hand with mine for a second. That was as close to sorry as we ever needed. Dad changed slowest. Pride doesn't dissolve overnight. It melts in thin layers like ice in March sun. But one evening on the porch swing, crickets starting up in the grass, he said almost offhand while staring at the horizon, "Your great-grandpa would have been proud of how you handled this. Not many people would have stepped back like that." My throat closed tight. I swallowed hard. That meant more than any courtroom win ever could have. Looking back now, years later, I finally get why Daniel fought my choice so hard. The law loves clean winners and clean losers, black robes, gavels, final orders. Family lives in the gray space between what people intend and what actually happens when life presses down. What I learned, and what I wish I'd understood sooner, is that boundaries aren't rejection. They're space. Space for everyone to grow, to stumble, to learn without someone always catching them. When you stop shielding people from the natural consequences of their choices, you hand them dignity. And you finally let yourself breathe, really breathe for the first time in years. If you've been quietly carrying more than your share, money, decisions, guilt, invisible labor, all of it, this is what I want you to hear straight from someone who learned it the hard way. Your value isn't measured by how much you endure in silence. Love doesn't demand you vanish so others can shine brighter. And doing the right thing doesn't always look like triumph on paper. Sometimes it looks like stepping aside, signing the paper, and letting reality teach the lesson you couldn't force anyone to hear. We're not perfect now. We probably never will be. There are still awkward silences, old habits that flare up, moments where pride tries to creep back in. But we talk straight when it matters. We see each other clearly, no more rewriting history to feel better. And we've found a path forward where no one has to disappear to keep the peace. That, to me, is the real reconciliation, not erasure, not victory, but honest space where everyone can stand without crushing someone else. If this hit close to home, take 10 seconds right now, no scrolling, no skipping. Think about the invisible loads you're carrying in your own family. Ask yourself which ones are truly yours, and which ones you picked up just because no one else would, or because saying no felt meaner than exhaustion. If you think someone else needs to hear this, a sibling, a friend, a parent who's carrying too much, send it their way. Share the link, the story, the quiet truth. And if stories about real families, quiet strength, hard-won boundaries, and the kind of love that survives truth matter to you, stick around, subscribe, and I'll keep sharing them, one honest chapter at a time. Thank you for listening.